Almost there, everybody.
I just got a pop-up that says that the meeting is streaming live.
Got it. Okay, it is live now, yes.
Okay, here we go.
Okay, good morning, everyone. Today is Wednesday, July 8th. This is the meeting of the Salem Public Art Commission. It is 9:35 a.m. and I'm going to call the meeting to order. First thing on our agenda is introductions. My name is Chris Darcy. I'm the chair of the commission.
I'm Kelly James. I am a commissioner.
Dean Cotter-Howell, Commissioner.
Rachel Boothby, Commissioner.
Michael Hernandez, Commissioner.
Spencer Emmerich, Commissioner.
I'm Heather Dimke. I'm with Public Works, and I'd like to welcome Spencer Emmerich as our new commissioner. This is his first meeting.
Excited to be a part of the team.
Police.
Steve Belshaw with Salem Police Department, and I have Angie Hedrick in here with me as well.
Thank you.
Good morning.
Good morning.
And good morning. This is Ricardo Besserell with Day CPM. I'm providing owner's representative services for the new Salem Police Station.
Thank you.
Welcome, everyone. And again, Spencer, welcome to you. We're glad that you've been a guest at a number of our meetings. So glad that the City Council formally appointed you to the Public Art Commission.
Thank you.
The next thing on our agenda is public comment, and we have received some public comment regarding the police station. I'm going to hold off on discussion of that until we approve the consent agenda. I'm looking for a motion to approve the consent agenda.
I move we approve the consent agenda.
A second.
It's been moved and seconded to approve the consent agenda. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? The consent agenda is approved. The first thing on our agenda is really a status report on the Blessing Hancock sculpture at the police station. You know that we have received some comment from the public regarding the potential inclusion of some words that might better reflect the state of community conversations here and elsewhere regarding police in general. But let's first start with an update on where the sculpture is. I know, Ricardo, I think you've been in touch with Blessing.
Yes.
Give us an update.
Yeah. So the quick update is the sculpture's on schedule. What I mean by that is it's scheduled to begin installation in the later part of August of this year. It'll be completely installed by October, and it's nearly fabricated. I was sent some photos from Blessing that were taken 3 weeks ago, showing that the main part of the sculpture structure had already been fabricated in the fabrication shop. And she indicated to me in a narrative that the cut files for the words that make up the body of the artwork have already been cut and are in the process of being assembled and incorporated into the artwork.
Thank you for that.
Yes.
I know that Eileen, I think, requested the words that are incorporated into the sculpture, and Heather shared that last night. So we've all got that. The only question that I had was, did the capitalization of some of those words signify something? Were those words that were selected? I didn't know the answer.
Angie, can you answer that?
I'm sorry, could you say the question again?
The question is that on the list of words that were collected, some of the words are capitalized and some are not. And my question is, does that capitalization signify anything?
I think that's the way it was taken from this online survey.
Okay.
If people typed it in all caps. Now, I can tell you for sure, SWAT is in all caps because it is an acronym.
Yes, sure.
but that's the only word.
Okay,
Yeah, so that's the way they were sent to Blessing. But given the font and the format she's using, they'll all be capitalized. It will all be consistent from
Okay.
my last recollection in our conversations with her, but that was a long time ago.
yeah. Well, let's have, let's have a little conversation about kind of where we are. It's no secret that there have been demonstrations all over the country. Definitely demonstrations here and protests here in Salem about recent incidents with the police, some involving the killing of people. And certainly when the words for this sculpture were gathered, we were, I think, in a different place in terms of a nation. And someone in the community reached out to me, I don't know, about a week ago, and expressed his concern about adding some words to this sculpture. I had some of the many of the same thoughts myself. But let's have some conversation from others about kind of where we are, how people are feeling about things, and whether there are any steps that we wish to consider at this point to do something. And I hope that everybody received the public comment that Heather circulated.
I sent that out to the group. I'm happy to read it out loud. If there's a desire for that, we might want to do that. And I can also share my screen with the list of words if folks would like to see that again.
Heather, to have you read the letter again, just so everybody is current.
Let me pull that up. So the public comment.
While Heather's pulling that up, if I could just add one comment to what Chris asked me earlier about the status of fabrication. I did omit that there is one portion of the artwork that has not been fabricated yet that Blessing shared with me, and that is the plaque associated with the artwork. And I'll read you the statement that she issued to me, which is, the plaque has not yet been designed, but it will be separate from the artwork. I could use some help in determining the location. It'll be made of stainless steel with black etching. Size is to be determined depending upon what message is approved. My plan is to start a conversation with the police department on the correct wording before finalizing in the plaque. She had also previously sent me a email indicating that her intention is to describe the emphasis on the concept of the naming of the art, equitas, and push towards a slant in the narrative of the artwork.
I missed that. You said something about push for the slant. Could you repeat that, please?
She intended on collaborating with the police department on some of the wording in, other than her importance of as an artist describing where the name equitas, which means equity, and why she named the sculpture that. She also felt that it was important to collaborate with the police department on some narrative that goes on that plaque that begins to touch on some of the current events that are happening right now.
Okay, thank you.
May I ask a question? You refer to a plaque. What is the location of this plaque? I don't remember a plaque being a part of this work. Are you thinking, would this be more of a label?
Again, as she indicated, it's the size, the location, the attachment are all yet to be determined. I asked her, is it attached to the art? Is it on a pedestal? Is it potentially embedded in the concrete? What is it? And she said, all of that is yet to be determined. The only thing that she said is definitive at this point is that it would be a stainless steel plaque with black etched words in it and size to be determined. So in other words, depends upon what we put on the plaque as far as the size. And I think we have some leniency in helping her determine where that plaque is located.
Thank you for that. Spencer, did you have something to add?
Not at this moment.
Okay.
Okay, shall I voice the public comment that was received?
Yes, please.
So on July 4th, I received an email, Dear Salem Public Art Commission, regarding agenda item 5A on your agenda. I would like to suggest that you reopen the online survey that was used to collect text from the Salem community last year for Equitas. A lot has happened since last year to encourage all of us to think about policing in our country. I am concerned that last year you asked for text relating to themes of honor, protection, and service. With everything that has happened in recent months, these concepts for me show a strong bias in favor of the status quo when the majority of Americans are now calling for reforms in policing. If all the text on the piece relate only to these items, I can almost guarantee you that Equitas will not be well regarded by a significant number of Salem citizens, especially young people and people of color. If the work does not include the words Black Lives Matter, this will be a terrible omission in my opinion. Please reopen the survey and collect more ideas in light of all that has happened in our country in the last several months. Thank you for your consideration.
Comments, reactions?
I think that one thing that I'd like to put on the table is that all artwork has different purposes. And it can be a reflection of the times, which is what Mr. Shepke is referring to. Or it can be something like an antidote to the pain of what we're experiencing. That's another function that art can provide. Another one would be that it is a reminder of what we should be. And my position on all of this is that Blessing Hancock's artwork, which is a completed statement, artistic statement, serves a purpose. It's an aspirational purpose. When I see those words, when I see the sculpture and think of the sculpture, I see it as a reminder to the community and to the police department in particular, that this is what we aspire to. We're human. We don't always make it, but we continue to move forward in this direction. And so for me, that sculpture sitting outside the police facility actually does serve an incredibly important community function in that it aspires us to do better. This is a societal issue. It is not just a police issue. The bias that Mr. Shepke is referring to is endemic in our schools. It's endemic in just about everything that is in society. And I believe that for the commission to piggyback on to this particular artwork is a misdirection. I think that if we are going to address the issues of our time in an artwork, we need to start from square one and have the entire community involved in it and really, really talk about these things, not just stick a couple of extra phrases, which definitely do reflect the particular time that we are living in. But our focus should be on opening up a real discussion beyond what is happening with this particular sculpture.
Other comments, reaction to Eileen's comments?
I had a couple comments. So regarding the final fabrication that you shared, Ricardo, I'm assuming that the words, the cut metal, are a seamless exterior. The metal portion with the verbiage is one piece, or do you know if it's multiple pieces that are then combined to create the total shell? So that's more of a question. Do we know this? Is it a seamless, larger? Is it two halves? Is it, do you have any details on that?
I don't. All I would be doing would be guessing that because of the shape of it, it's not likely one continuous piece, but it does get assembled in a way based on the pictures that we all seen to make it appear to be a seamless piece.
Yeah, that's kind of what I don't want to assume that, but that was my line of questioning there, because my first comment would be, if there is the desire to modify the words, include others, is there a strategy that we could potentially refabricate a portion or portions without having to redo the whole piece? So that's more of a question, meaning that we could react and if there's a cost associated with that, obviously it would need to be discussed within the total budget. The other one would be the plaque. Obviously the plaque can accommodate, as Blessing was explaining. And then also, that I just wanted to remind everybody that there was the idea with this piece when it was presented originally, it lights up, it's illuminated, and this idea of celebrating certain moments in time with the use of light. It's just a reminder in my own mind that, look, when this thing launches too, there's a lot of opportunity, piggybacking on what Eileen's saying in terms of making it a community event, to steer that presentation, opening, reception of the piece to include, all those pieces, the lighting pieces, like what are we saying? It could be a detail, obviously, but the lighting obviously doesn't address the verbiage on the actual sculpture. But in terms of a beacon for capturing a moment in time and being very deliberate about the messaging, obviously is one of my concerns.
Is it possible to get from Blessing the actual words that will be in her work? I mean, we've got a final draft. Does that mean that every one of the words on this page is included in the piece so far? Anybody know the answer to that?
It's a good question.
Because this is a lot, there are lots of words. I believe that she said she could fit a lot of words in there. I'm just curious. Well, I would like to, I like Michael's question about, how the piece is put together and whether it's possible that any part of it could be removed with a substitution. I appreciate Eileen's logic path in kind of outlining how this piece developed. But I do think that it would be, before I say, we can address any additional comments or philosophy through a plaque, I would like to know whether, I would like to know whether whether any word substitution is possible. I'd like to know what the words are that are included. And then obviously, what it would cost. I just think that given the sentiment across the country in communities large and small, that to not address this fully, to explore any options for addressing it fully would be a mistake for us at this point. That's my personal opinion.
I agree that it's important to address fully. And that's why I would like to see us consider moving to, we have the funds to actually commission a piece of artwork that fully and completely allows the community to respond to the times and to probe more deeply the divisions that are happening in our society right now. I feel that to just change words on this particular sculpture is not adequate. Not adequate.
Other comments from commissioners?
I'd like to say that for the most part, I agree with Eileen. However, I do see the rationale into looking into if first of all, can we make a change to the current sculpture that's going to be created or that's being created? Is it possible, and what would that cost? However, I'm afraid that by adding a couple of phrases, it might be seen as a token gesture. But if we went with something that, like Eileen is proposing, that would dissuade that. I mean, I think that we're in a special moment and that we need a piece of artwork that reflects the moment. And I hate to see us just try to add on to something that was intended for something else.
I agree with Kelly. I'm interested to see, I'm sure the Salem police have had discussions about this, but I do believe maybe it might pacify, but it definitely would be a token if it's just a phrase on a piece of sculpture that was intended for something else. But
Rachel?
Yeah, I think that first off, I want to say, Eileen, thank you for your passionate description of the sculpture. I think that I agree with what you said, that it is in front of the police station, but it's a sculpture that belongs to the entire community. And I see it as containing words and phrases that are, like you said, aspirational. In a lot of ways, I think that it serves as a reminder of what the police should aspire to in order to fulfill their commitment to the community, their responsibility as police officers, and the core values that they have. So in a way, it's a reminder, serves as a measure of accountability to the community, and the words that are on it reflect that. So I do think, though, hindsight is always 20/20. And so the events of today are illuminating maybe some of the flaws in the process of procuring the words and how the community was involved, and maybe there was some more equitable ways to solicit input. I know we did, or the police and Angie and Blessing did a really good job of getting out in the community and getting a lot of responses. And then we have the list now, and I would like to see a final list of what the words are that are actually going to be on the sculpture. I am torn because I think that if there is an opportunity to look at particular panels and see if there is a way to incorporate some other words, I think that could be meaningful. It also could appear to be token gesture. I agree that if we're going to address this in an artwork it needs to be more deliberate than just adding some words. And so I'm kind of torn. I am torn. I think that the plaque is a vehicle for the artist, Blessing, to speak about what her intent was with the piece. And we kind of, even though there's a community input aspect to this artwork, it is also, it's an artwork. And so I want to hear what the artist has to say. I think that's going to be a really important part of unveiling this piece and communicating what the intent is of the piece itself. And so it's, you know, we're at a tricky time because the fabrication is happening and public events are happening. And so how do we balance that? So I'm not sure what the answer is, but I do think that it needs to be addressed in some way, and whether it's doing a better job of communicating how the sculpture came about and what the intent is behind it, that could be one part of it. So those are my thoughts.
Deputy Chief Belshaw, what can you share with us?
Well, you know, this is part of why we involved you folks in this process is I am nowhere close to being an artist. And so when we get these comments, I mean, you folks are all involved in artwork, and as an artist looking at it, you have a vision of this project and you're in the final stages, and now being asked to change that. I don't know how that feels for you as an artist of do you change the intent of your artwork midstream and those kinds of things. So that's kind of where we're relying on input from you and giving us advice on how we address this situation. We did a big push to outreach to get input from the community, and I think we had a great response. I thought we had a great list of input from people, and so we know this will be very visible, and we had lots of discussions in the committee meetings about choosing the artwork and what it would represent. And so I think that's our dilemma right now.
Thank you for that. I have a question, and maybe this is one that Ricardo can respond to. Is this piece going to be on any kind of a low base, or will it be at ground level? I just don't remember. Do you know?
I'm not sure what the height of the base is, how much of the foundation is exposed. Steve or Angie, do you recall?
I want to say it was like on an 18-inch or so pedestal that you could sit around it, and but also it was low enough that you could touch the artwork and things like that. So I think it was sitting on a fairly low base.
It may be, you know, as we just have a conversation with Blessing, a frank conversation, it may be that words could be, in addition to having a plaque, which I see as being, you know, kind of not a huge thing, it could be that there is some additional wording that forms the basis, the base of this piece, which we've now described as an aspirational message. I don't know, what do people, how do people feel about even having that conversation with her?
I think though the light, when it's lighted internally, the words are on the ground. So I think that if you have something then on the base itself, that might, I don't know, interfere with that. I think though that the plaque does need some contextualizing. The RFP, I'm looking at what was asked of the artist. It said the department's core values are honor, integrity, service, and compassion. We are excited about honoring both our long history as a police department and demonstrating our commitment to our community. So the plaque itself needs to explain what the intent was, not only with what was asked of the artist to create, and then how she then responded with Equitas, and then the process, the community input piece of it is an important part of how that artwork was created. So I do think that there needs to be some sort of explanation of how the piece came to be that's beyond just who's the artist and the name of the piece kind of thing.
I agree. Other comments from folks?
You know, I think describing the way that how the piece came together and the community involvement is important. And I actually, you know, I think that there was a really good effort that was made to include the community in the creation of this sculpture. So the thing is, the times have just changed. And I mean, that's the thing. It's, we created something, you know, months ago, and now we're in a whole different world. And so, you know, what we do, it's, this obviously kind of an unusual situation, but certainly reaching out to Blessing to see where she's at, what her thoughts are, I think is important.
I support that.
Is the police station open to having a second commission piece of artwork that's dead? Like, how would that go about? Is that even a possibility?
Oh, no, I wasn't suggesting that, Spencer. What I'm suggesting is that as the commission, we have the ability to actually commission a separate artwork that may go into a park or something like that. It's
Okay.
not associated with the police station.
Okay.
Right, but I also think that our short-term reality, and I'm thinking, you know, even 3 to 5 years, is that the city of Salem is not going to have a capital improvement project on the scale of either the police station or the library that would generate the budget to do a work. So this would be something that would need to be privately fundraised for.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's very likely, and I believe it could be done. And I'm asking you, Chris, what your opinion is of actually pivoting and seeing the that what we are all of us in agreement needs to happen in our city, a real conversation. Why not move to a work of art that we would be focusing on that from square one?
Well, I would certainly support that notion, but I will also acknowledge that I am a white woman of a certain age living in a certain part of this city. And if the community of color in Salem wants a memorial, a work of art, a public expression about diversity and equity, then I am not the person to lead that, because I am of the community, but I am not one of those people.
Absolutely. And towards that end, that would be one of the absolutely paramount things that we would have to do is bring in somebody who could who could authentically move it forward. And I'm in complete agreement with that. I just have a very hard, as an artist, to be in the final steps of putting a piece together and to have yourself thrown back into the design phase. And even though it might be possible to take out words and substitute other words, when you're creating a piece of art, you are thinking holistically, and each piece fits together in a very particular way. And it's not always interchangeable, that you can actually take a section out and then substitute something else.
Chris, can I add something to what Eileen is saying? Because I do have some insight into my correspondence with Blessing.
Yes, please.
So when I initiated this correspondence was on June 30th, and my intent was to ask her exactly many of the questions that you're asking right now. And I asked her specifically whether or not the piece has the option to be changed, modified, and incorporate additional words and or perspectives that might not have been on people's forefront of their minds at the point in time when those words are being collected. Her response back, which was, let's see, the next day, said, "Thank you for reaching out. I've been wondering how all of this upheaval is affecting things in Salem. Unfortunately, the cut files have been processed for this artwork, but I will be sure to include an explanation on the plaque." And then I talked about how she talks about the slant on towards current events. So my point is, my question was, what is possible? And her response back was acknowledgement of what's happening in our society right now, but did not offer that there was a possibility. I think theoretically and logically, we can all logic that there certainly, anything that's fabricated has the possibility of being modified. But I echo DC Belshaw's sentiments when I say I'm not an artist. And so I don't know whether or not art changes at that point. Does it still become the piece of art that when you just cut out a section and put a new section in? The other thing I did ask her, just since we've been on this call, how many of these words that were important to the community are going to be reflected, and if they're not all reflected in the artwork, which ones will be. But I think from a community member perspective, and also I am male, but I'm not a white male in the community, I will say that the community, from my perspective, everybody should be proud of the community and the words that they did come up with, because this is not a sculpture that incorporate words like SWAT and chief of police and police dog, but hopefully will incorporate the other words: accountability, character, commitment, community, diversity, engaged, equality, fairness, friendly, future, helpful, history, hope, humility, save the people, Salem Shalom, respect, positive, peace, patience, outreach, open, love, kind, integrity, inspire, inclusive, service, support, trust, values, and welcome. And some of those words in both English and Spanish. That to me is while they might not include specific phrases, to me, the spirit of the social causes right now that are being echoed throughout our culture are reflective in a lot of those words. And to me, that makes me proud of my community that they came up with those words in a different time.
Well, and I think that was the whole basis for selecting this work, and for holding, some small and large and certainly open and inclusive events to ask folks across Salem what they felt was going to be important to include on this work. That's how we got to this list. I agree with you completely, Ricardo. I just want to, I want to make sure, as we are here as a group, and we've been together for a long time working on this art project, that we look at all of our options. We look at the timeline, we look at, what any change might include. We look at cost. We look at whether it's the right thing, the wrong thing. I just want to make sure that, we have agreement, either that something needs to change or that it doesn't. Is there enough opportunity with this plaque? Do we need to do something more? I just want to, this has been a huge spring, on multiple fronts, and I just want to, do the right thing. I want to explore all of our options. And I'm certainly, so let's just go through kind of what I think maybe we need to do moving forward. So we need to confirm with Blessing the final words that will be incorporated into the sculpture. We need to better understand her fabrication process, and this is not a single piece of metal that's been cut out. There are elements. How do those things come together? In what lengths, a single word, a phrase, a band, I don't know. Maybe better understanding fully the foundation, the base, it's about 18 inches, we know, but just finalizing that. And then, I don't think that we're talking about going back out to the community, opening up another online survey, doing another riverfront park event. But I think it would be good to just get the final details from Blessing. And then we may need another conversation. And then I think regardless of what happens in that conversation, working very closely with Blessing on the language for what she describes as a plaque. And typically, in a work of public art, those are not exhaustive, descriptors. So figuring out, what does that really look like and what goes on it? And I would think that we'd want that to be very, very carefully worded.
Chris, I've received back a couple of answers to your questions already from Blessing. Number one, yes, all of the final words will be incorporated into the piece of art, every single one of them. Second, it's not fabricated in one single piece. It is assembled. And third, she did indicate when I pressed her that anything is possible with significant change and schedule delay.
Thank you for that. That does not surprise me. That I appreciate that, especially, she has been, I think, aware from the very beginning that this project was on a schedule and a budget. And, the police facility it's moving along, and she was contracted to be moving along on her work of art. So, and she's on schedule. No surprise, no surprise, she is a professional.
I'd like to just jump in quickly, and Angie, if she's still with us, could probably correct me, but just to state out loud for the record, a summary of the outreach that was provided in terms of collecting words and phrases for this piece. As I recall, we had issued a news release, a press release back in May of 2019 that was sent out and posted on the website. About that same time, Blessing did a video interview on the Building Buzz segments that have been going along with the police station. We invited folks to participate in an online survey that went through till August of 2019. Blessing attended an event in which we invited the public at the convention center for folks to come and meet her and share their ideas. I believe she was at the art festival, the annual art fair at Bush Park. She was at Public Works Day, and we got words from children during that event. So there was a fair amount of effort put into engaging the community and trying to collect responses. And I don't know if I've missed anything with that.
So what you may have missed was just our planning and strategy began in January. And in February, Blessing did have the little model ready. And so she was at Breakfast with the Chief and she collected responses there. And she used a form, and that form that Blessing developed is the same form that we used out in the public as well as online. The only thing we added was on the flip side to make sure that it was in Spanish. And so then in April, that's when we met with SPAC to discuss all of the outreach strategies. And then the first week of May, that's when we did the building buzz to explain the public art project, to explain Blessing's concept. That building buzz video got a lot of views. And then May 17 is when we began promotions for the Meet the Artist event. And you're right, Heather, on the 24th of May was when we did the media release that explained the piece, and the essential part of it being the community engagement. We described the sculpture, and then we were always driving the online form that was available. Blessing was interviewed at that May 29 Meet the Artist event by local media, and she was featured on CCTV, Channel 21, and on YouTube, and that got a lot of attention as well. We were at Public Works Day, and we were at the Salem Art Fair, and we made sure that all three of those events also had bilingual staffing to make sure that we were engaging our English and our Spanish speaking community. Every event was promoted on social media. Every event we promoted also pushed the survey link for people to participate. In addition to that, to make sure that I was doing the best outreach that I could to our entire community, I had some additional Hispanic outreach events planned through the partners with whom I work. The bonus, I think, for the overall project was we were able to talk about what this public art piece was going, why we were doing it, why it is the requirement portion, I should say. We were able to feature the artist and her concept and her background too, that she's a Pacific Northwest artist. You know, we every time I messaged it, it was about the posters, the flyers, all of those pieces always included the concept that using Blessing's words. We also had the opportunity to talk about the role of SPAC. And I also was able to weave in the public art catalog and reminding people this is just one of about 100 pieces that are all over the city. And so it was able to push out the online tour that we have. And for example, the one community event that we did have that was just in general, I made sure that we had it at the Sculpture Garden at the Convention Center to, again, put it in people's minds that public art is something that Salem believes in.
And you know, there's one other thing that Michael and I participated in even before we got into this formal art planning process. We went to an open house that was at the Broadway Commons building, and we took some of the concepts that many of you had, you know, identified as we looked at public art that we thought would be interesting potentially for this building. And we had some inspiration boards and heard from the community, the chief, others who were there about, what they reacted positively or negatively to. And, I remember we stayed there until the very, very end of that event. And the comments were overwhelmingly, make this a positive thing, make this uplifting for the community, make this, don't make this about the police facility as a fortress. And I think it was a very positive experience. Wouldn't you say, Michael?
Yeah, I do. I mean, I think it just it informed the process, from the front end. I mean, to me, it's due diligence. It's fun to do, and it's always great to see what people have to say. I mean, it's unfiltered, and I mean, the list of words, I'm looking at it again here. I mean, it's you could add 50 and you'd add 50 more words and take 50 away. And, I guess the idea here is that, I mean, when I hear how many opportunities there was for public and the outreach that was done, I mean, it makes me feel good. I mean, I think the process is what everyone would hope for. And if we had any feedback from the videos that were posted, I mean, I watched one the other day, again, that was shared. I don't know if there's been any, comments that we don't know about, but I'd certainly entertain if there is, that we know about it all, to be able to react in any way. So.
Yeah, I just want to, again, I want to just be mindful that I think we did all the right things. We are living in a different time. We've had just some horrible things that have happened recently that have put a different cast on things. And I just want to make sure that as we move forward, that we're super mindful, that we're listening, that we're paying attention. I don't object to, saying Salem needs a piece that really speaks to these things and it should be a piece of its own, but it's like, okay, great. How is that going to happen? I just, I don't know. I don't have an answer for that. I'm mindful that we've been talking about this for now almost an hour, feeling like, what else would people like to put on the table on the public record, for us to consider this morning.
Can I say one more thing, Chris?
Absolutely.
When I was thinking about this last night, I was thinking about the Statue of Liberty, which is iconic for the whole nation, and personally iconic for my family, since my parents and older brothers and sisters came in a ship to America a year and a half before I was born. The Statue of Liberty has words on it that were added after the fact, but when those words were added, that made the symbol even more powerful, probably for those people who were seeing America as some kind of beacon of hope. We now are living in an age where you could arguably say that those words are meaningless because we are moving in a different direction. It doesn't change the artwork, and it doesn't change the way an artwork can speak to people. And change can happen in a lot of different ways. And one of the ways that change can happen is when people move to the positive. And I believe that Blessings Peace has that capacity for Salem.
I agree. I mean, not to interrupt you. I'd say my comment would be let's not underestimate the opportunity to create a celebrate, to your point, Eileen, when police station's open, when we unveil this sculpture, that we don't miss an opportunity to really, you know, create a celebration. I mean, the diversity piece, the equity piece, like, I would hate for this to just be underappreciated for what it does represent, and that people, you know, would see it in the right light from the very start. And we don't just see this as like, oh, we'll just kind of unveil it and move on. I mean, I think the idea is this, what does that community event look like for even having Blessing here and launching this thing? I'm interested in that conversation. I think it could be a real cool moment, because again, a reminder of, like, we had said on the outset that we like this concept because it created moments in time and opportunity to celebrate different things at different times. So to set precedents at the time this is unveiled, I think would be a really great thing to do. You know, that's outside of all the other conversation. I just want to remind everybody that, hey, you know, we could have a really great event, and then we would, you know, it can be is best scripted to address things and involve people of the community. I don't know how far that goes, but I mean, it's the city of Salem opportunity with the police to define maybe what that could look like.
I'd like to make a comment too. The letter that we got from Jim Shipke, I'm not sure if that's how you pronounce his name. You know, he hasn't seen this list that's being included. And as it's been said already, you know, there's a lot of great terms on here that really reflect some of the mood of what we are talking about. And, you know, speaking a little bit to Eileen's point, I think that this piece does have power. And, you know, maybe we don't have 2 specific terms that he gave us on here, but we've got a lot of other content. And so I just want to say that. I also do think that it's good that we have this conversation to make sure that we address this properly. So.
Any further comments on this topic?
Chris, just one other answer back from Blessing. I did get confirmation back from her that the art is the art. There is no exposed pedestal that the art sits on. The foundation is below grade. She's pulling up the details, but I believe probably what the police department was remembering is that the height of the part of the art that touches the ground is probably approximately 18 inches. But again, I don't have the shop drawings here in front of me, but there is no concrete pedestal that sits above base, above the grade.
Okay, that's good. Thank you for that confirmation, Ricardo.
Yeah.
What else on this topic? So Ricardo's answered a few of the questions. I guess that as we've moved through our conversation, I am not hearing a groundswell of urgency to add words. Am I hearing that correctly? We had questions. Now we know there's no base, you know, so that's not an opportunity. There remains significant opportunity with the plaque, language on the plaque. You know, yes, you know, the piece could be altered for a cost that we don't know. Yeah, but I guess maybe we could even have a show of hands from the members of the commission about how, you know, are you feeling like there is not a sense of urgency to add words to this piece? Based on the conversation that we've had, Eileen's excellent summary at the beginning about the piece really having aspirational words, Michael's, Kelly's, Spence, all of you have spoken about that. We've reviewed the significant public involvement that we had, online, live, virtual, all ages, multiple locations. You know, I felt excellent about that. I appreciate Michael's comments about being very, very thoughtful and mindful around an unveiling of this, so that this piece is positioned as we've intended it to be, but that we are very mindful that our environment has changed. Eileen threw out the idea about even suggesting another piece that would be commissioned in the community, looking at the feasibility of that. But I guess, as Ricardo mentioned, this project is on a schedule. Our artist, to her credit, is on schedule. And so if we want to consider any alteration, we'd have to have some strong direction from this body today. And I guess I'm asking, do we have that direction, or are we okay with things as they stand now, given the fact that we have a couple of opportunities to help position the piece in the context that we are living in today?
I do have one question, getting back to the words. I'm wondering, I know that at some point it was discussed that there were 1,000 words submitted. I know that there were duplicates of words and those were pulled out and so forth, but the words that were forwarded to Blessing, were there words that were not included, that were submitted, that were not included on the list?
You mean that were beyond the duplications that were eliminated?
Correct.
I don't know. Angie, do you know the answer to that?
There were singles, and what was sent to Blessing was the ones that received the most. And so if one person submitted one word, like an example, someone submitted the phrase "F you," but it was one person, but under, it didn't bubble up to the top, certainly, because I don't know what we would have done if it had bubbled up to the top, but
okay, so the words that were submitted to her, well, did she say I need X number of words in order to make the design? Because if I'm remembering correctly, the words repeat around the piece. So did she give a baseline number of words that she needed to create the repeat, or do you recall?
No, not really, because she was accepting words and phrases, and
okay.
So it would, you just didn't know the length of the words or how many phrases would be submitted or anything like that. So she didn't really give us a specific number. Just send me as many as you can.
I remember her saying something about the fact that the work could actually accommodate a large number of words.
Right.
That stuck with me.
I've asked her the question whether or not any of the words repeat. I'll let you know if she answers that before we conclude this meeting. I do imagine that if she had 500 words versus 250 words, the size of the sculpture wouldn't have changed. The size of the font would have changed.
Right. That would be my assumption as well. Okay, what else do we need to talk about this morning? Okay, so just in terms of timing, how are we going to share any new information that comes back to us in a timely manner so that we're all abreast of things and we're mindful of the schedule that we're on? I mean, today is July 8th. If she's going to install in 5 weeks, let's just say that's the opening of her install window. That's not a lot of time.
Yeah. Ricardo, do you have an idea of her timeline for the wording on the plaque?
I don't, but I'm in pretty consistent communication with her here this morning, so I can certainly ask her that, and we can engage her on that. She said, she indicated to me that she would like to reach out to you both, Angie and Steve, to begin that process.
Okay. So Chris, I guess my response would be for you as a group to start thinking about what message. So when Blessing sends us her version of the plaque or what she's looking, we'll send that to you through Heather, but you guys, you as a committee can be thinking about what you would like to see on the plaque to communicate your thoughts to the community as well. So I would say be thinking along those lines, and then as soon as we get anything from her, we'll share that with the group.
That sounds like a good plan. And I think, obviously, this meeting's being recorded. I think that we can pull some of Eileen's earlier comments about the aspirational intent of the piece. And I think that we could definitely collaborate, to get a good final product.
That would be awesome. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Chris, I did just hear back from Blessing. Many of the words do repeat. She said she'd have to analyze which words repeat, and I asked her to do that.
Great. Thanks, Ricardo.
Yeah.
Okay, this has been a good discussion. I really appreciate everyone being present by virtually this morning, because this is going to be an important piece, and rolling it out is also going to be really important.
Yes.
Are we ready to move on to the library, Heather? Or if any final comments for the good of the order on this project?
So if I can just share, so our next regularly scheduled meeting is August 12th. So once we get a better idea, it sounds like late August is what we were thinking for potentially to start the install. If we could get an idea of what that date might look like, and then we can start to kind of adjust if we need to do an additional meeting or start planning for that kind of install celebration as well.
Yeah, I did drive by the police station yesterday. And what's the timeline for that, the street improvements to be completed? Do you have any idea, Ricardo?
Yeah, the overall station will be completed, including the street improvements and the plaza by September 18th. That will not be when the police station will open, because of course we have some commissioning of the internal systems of the police station during the last couple of weeks of September, followed by some opportunity. I think the police department and the city of Salem are targeting the first couple of weeks of October as the opportunity for celebrations and tours and things like that.
Okay,
And
good to know.
we will probably do 2 separate events, one the grand opening of the building, and then a separate event would be the unveiling of the artwork. So we're working on planning on those and seeing what that looks like. It depends on what phase we're in.
Oh,
to see
sure.
how many people we can have and all that kind of stuff. So it's still a little up in the air, but predicting that, but we're working on that, and we'll you all will be a big part of that.
Great. Well, I know I think we did a very successful unveiling of the Good Sense sculpture, which is over by the Safe building.
Mm-hmm.
And granted, there was a Native American sculptor involved, but we had a Native blessing, we had some speakers, we had a good group of people. It's very content rich.
Good.
And I hope that we can help have the same kind of unveiling for this piece.
Absolutely. Thank you. All right. We will get off the meeting. And
Ricardo and Angie, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ricardo.
You're welcome. Bye.
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 Well, let's move on to the library. Drove by the library also, demolition underway. Maybe should I just report quickly? Amanda Wojcik, who, and I'll give a little bit of background for Spencer's first meeting. So there was an open RFQ for the library. A number of finalists were selected. They presented kind of design concepts, and over 2 days of presentation, ultimately Amanda Wojcik, who is on the art faculty at the U of O, was selected for a large interior relief. There will be the main big open space of the library is going to be further opened up, so that I forget what they call it, that open grid ceiling will be exposed. The interior colors all of those orange stacks and the wood paneling is going to be gone. Interior will be a big white space. It's going to be beautiful. Anyway, Amanda has a piece that will be on the wall above what used to be the reference section. You know, that big wall. She had some references to the Dewey Decimal System in her proposal. And I guess Mr. Dewey was actually not such a great guy. So the librarian suggested that she might rethink some of those number symbols. And it took a while, given all the pandemic closures, it took a while for her to get a contract. She now has a contract with the city. Things are moving ahead. And we had kind of an update meeting. She is going to rethink her piece in terms of kind of some color and texture, and was going to try to get into the space and then come back with some design modifications. And that's where things stand. But I'm excited. She's a very good communicator. She recently did a piece at U of O, an exterior piece. Of course, I forget which building it's at, but it had some highly polished chrome elements. And I think the architects were interested in seeing whether she could bring some of that sparkle, for lack of a better word, into her piece for the library here. What else should we report out on that process?
I think that's where we're at. I had checked in with Erin because I couldn't recall, but yeah, it sounds like Amanda's going to be meeting soon with the librarians, Sarah Stroll, and I think Hacker Architects again, to kind of walk through the space and the changes that have occurred already. And then, you know, kind of regroup on that initial concept idea, as you stated, and then come back to us, to the larger selection group as a whole. And that meeting has not yet been scheduled. There was some discussion of, you know, initiating public outreach as part of that art project as well. There's a lot of questions right now, given the pandemic and how that might look. But I think, you know, Sarah's been doing videos now of the library, kind of similar to the police building buzz. She's doing construction chapters. So that was one thought, is that maybe in August, when they do their next video, they might introduce Amanda and kind of talk about her background and you know, a high level overview of what we're thinking for the new piece in the library at that time. I mean, I think that's the extent, that's as far as we've got right now.
Yeah, that's a good summary. So I guess, you know, elsewhere at the library, the next kind of phase will be figuring out the plan for the reinstallation of the library's collection. What goes where, what makes the most sense. And I guess related to that, we'll get to the convention center in a few minutes, but there is a large Harry Woodman painting that belongs to the city that is at the convention center, which I think might be interesting to consider bringing over to the library if there's room for it. It's a beautiful painting, and it's in what I would describe as the back hall of the convention center. The hallway that borders the sculpture court. So it's the south end of the building. It's not a very prominent location for what I think is one of the nicer, larger paintings that the city owns. So I don't know if there's opportunity to even have that conversation, but I'll throw it out today, just to get it on in the minutes. Anything else on the library? Okay. Let's move on to the convention center. So on the good news front, the project, it's a kitchen remodel. There's that generated about $9,000 in 1.5% money. And the Oregon Artist Series Foundation voted last month to add $6,000 to that budget as a gift that would get the art budget up to $15,000. Gives a little bit more buying power for the project. So generous gift from Oregon Artist Series Foundation. There is a selection committee that Michael and I serve on, and along with representatives of the convention center, the general manager, Chrissy Birch, and then she asked 2 people from OASF to be part of that, Mary Lou Zeke and Stephen Adams. We brainstormed. So the convention center, it is a multi-use facility, where there's food, there is liquid, things move around all the time. We identified a wall space that is on the ground level on the main hallway that faces Commercial Street as a site for a large painting, another large painting. And we brainstormed a number of artists whose work might be appropriate. I reached out to you as SPAC members, you contributed a number of names. We ultimately got down to a short list of 12 artists, and I circulated that list this morning. And it includes a number of people from Salem, a number of people from Portland. All of the people, I think, have reputations within the region. They're in major collections. They're known in the community. They're people who've been on the faculty of colleges, community colleges, art schools, etc. There are 2 artists of color. Regrettably, only 2 artists of color on that short list of 12. But there are 4 of us that I consider to sort of be the content experts. So Michael, myself, Stephen Adams, and Mary Lou Zeke, we split up the list of 12. We each took 3 artists or their galleries to inquire about, what work do you have available for purchase? What are the dimensions? What does it look like? What does your pricing look like? And we're just finishing up that information gathering. It's interesting. Like it's hard to get a lavador of any scale for $15,000. But you can get pretty close to getting a very large Lucinda Parker piece for $15,000 and everything in between. So I am working hard to try to convince Oregon Artist Series Foundation that they should consider buying an additional work using their own money, and potentially, because it's the 15th year of the convention center's operation. And maybe that will happen, so that there could be 2 pieces acquired. But that's kind of all I know. Michael, what else do you want to add?
It appears that all the artists have been contacted and it's moving along. I think there's very few, I don't know of any holes. And so that's all moving in terms of giving images, prices, details. Of the ones that I've been notifying, obviously there's an overwhelming appreciation and excitement around being considered. That's always a good feeling. Some people just create an opportunity for people out of nowhere. It's always fun to share that they're being considered. I've seen some really great pieces come through. I mean, I think it's going to be pretty challenging. I think we've got the list is pretty awesome. So think the meeting's set for July 23rd, but I don't know if it's, if we have a time slot to meet at the convention center. That would be the time that we would then review everything.
That's the 21st at 1.
The 21st?
Mhm.
Okay. So the idea there is like, you know, we have to format everything. Are we going to be looking, you know, it's more of a question, are we going to be looking at electronic images, or is everything going to be printed out? You know, so, you know, obviously I'm a big fan of there being, you know, high quality representation. If anything's printed out, that it's done fairly, you know, it's even, meaning we don't have some inferior prints of something that doesn't represent the work. So those are little details we'll have to work through. I mean, we have a bit of time to get to that point, but I know I've received all the pieces from the artists I've contacted. I think Stephen as well. So yeah, we're not at a deficit, and there's going to be a lot to choose from, is my inclination. So
A lot.
quite a few pieces are coming through.
Yeah. I think of the list of 12, it looks like 15 grand doesn't buy, you know, you'd be buying a very small Jim Lavador piece. So that's probably not going to go ahead. And then George Green's work, I think, is more expensive. I know Stephen Adams spoke with his wife, and he said they didn't, within our price range, they didn't really have anything as well. But the artists, I had Michael Brophy, Lucinda Parker, and Ryan Pierce, and there's a lot of work available.
Mm-hmm.
So, and I do think, picking up on Michael's comment, you know, people are honored to get a phone call. They're, you know, the galleries they really want the business. You know, they were when I called Russo Lee, they responded to me immediately. I called Elizabeth Leach, they responded immediately. And I mean, this is a tough time to be running any kind of an art business. So, you know, people were I think they were just happy to hear that Salem knew what they were doing, and, you know, they're on the list.
Yep.
We'll see. It's gonna, you know, if anyone would like, I think if anybody wanted to sit in on the meeting at the convention center, you'd be welcome to. And I'd be happy. I have a lot of images that were sent to me by the galleries. So if anybody wants to see them, I can forward an email. Easily done.
I know the only other thing that's come up is transportation, and that's more of a down the line piece, but since potentially a larger piece of art, I know that the Froelich Gallery offered to pay for the transportation. Victor Maldonado's work, it's a large piece. They offered that, and then Richard Thompson on the other end is submitting some pieces that aren't even in the state of Oregon. I think they're in Texas or something. Was asking if there was a budget for transportation. So those are all the little details as we get, you know, once we make a selection, we can get creative, right, about how things get paid for, installed, etc. So
yeah. And
Was there
sadly,
any?
oh, go ahead.
Oh, I was just wondering, was there any discussion of improving the environment in which the artwork is hanging, in terms of the labels, the color of the walls?
I did not bring up your idea to repaint the convention center with the convention center.
Well, the red, not the whole convention center, but there is the red wall that just suck the life out of a lot of those paintings.
No, I'm being completely frank. No, I did not bring that up. The labels remain a big issue for me. And there was a commitment to standardize the label format, and that is still a work in progress. you know, I like the format of the labels that the Hallie Ford used for the pieces on loan at SCC. You know, they're not encyclopedic, but there's good information. There's basic information about the work, when it was created, etc. You know, they've had a couple of gifts that came with strings. Terry Melton contributed a Phyllis Yes piece. He wanted something, you know, he wanted something, you know, connected with that. So the convention center has literally been closed. They can't, their numbers don't work given the restrictions on gatherings. And so most of the staff is laid off. There's hardly anyone working. And so it's, you know, things are just in limbo. But I do think the labeling will be resolved. But yeah, it's pretty amazing. They have 2 spaces set up for distanced meetings, you know, in a ballroom with a big table that's a U. And, you know, we had a couple meetings there actually. So, but there's almost no one working.
And Chris, the situation is that the public art, Salem Public Art, own the piece, and it is permanently in the convention center, or is there kind of a shared ownership because of the donation? How is that?
Well, my understanding is that the city of Salem created an urban renewal district or agency that has the oversight of the convention center, and that urban renewal agency has a parallel art selection process that makes use of SPAC. I don't know the background for that, but the Urban Renewal Agency staff is part of the selection committee, and that Urban Renewal Agency, which is an arm of the city, will own the work.
That's my understanding as well. Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's not under our collection.
Well, it is owned by the city, but it is owned by the city's Urban Renewal Agency, and I don't know who hooks into what organizationally.
Yeah, I think there's been a lot of questions on the relationship over the years and who owns what. And frankly, I haven't had time to dive into it. I know there's some records that have been kept over the years. There was an intent to do kind of an updated agreement between the SCC and the city and the urban renewal and clarify that. It's kind of a gray area, but that's my understanding, is that the agency would have ownership of this pieces as well as other pieces that they've acquired through their public percent for art policy over the years. Whether that could be kind of parsed through and separated with kind of legal help. I don't know. I think we probably could, but we just haven't gone there.
I mean, the reality is that most of the work at the convention center has come from 3 sources. One, there are large paintings on loan from the Hallie Ford Museum of Art. 2, there are pieces that have been acquired by the Oregon Artist Series Foundation and gifted to the convention center. And 3, there are pieces that are owned by the city that are at that property, like the Widman, like there are a couple sculptures. And then outside, it's probably a mixture of sculptures. But a lot of the pieces have been gifted by OASF or were purchased through those early mayor's annual shows that were at the convention center when it first opened. Kristen Coons, Marilyn Higginson,
James Mattingly, I think.
the Jim Mattingly, yeah. And then, Terry Melton gifted a Phyllis Yes. It's a mixture. I do think, when the dust settles, it would be good to just get this cleared up.
I agree.
Yeah, I think
Yeah.
it would be, and also perhaps, I know that we've tried to do that with the library as well, but
Yeah.
there is, of course, the foundation collection, which is always a big question mark as well, whether that is actually owned by the city or not. I think we're kind of operating under two different, almost identically opposite assumptions about that.
Mhm.
I agree. We need to dive in and look to separate that out, clarify it. It's just going to take some time to do that. So
Yeah.
And I do think, looking at just the acceptance of gifts. I mean, OASF has, at least at the convention center, they've made some conscious moves regarding purchases. Like there's a Melcats, there's a, I'm forgetting who else is over there. But there's some significant works. It's not like someone's saying, I'm moving, I'm going to give this work on paper to the library. At least the scale of the convention center requires a work of a certain scale. So there is some good stuff there. Yeah. Okay, shall we move on to the city of Hillsborough?
sure. And just before we do, if I can just ask, I looked at my notes this morning. I think we were waiting for a draft scope of work from Rebecca and Cherie, and I didn't see anything in my emails. Hopefully I didn't miss that. Is that still pending?
For the convention center?
For the convention center for the contract?
Oh, maybe I may have gone back and forth with Rebecca just individually.
Just let me know if there's something I need to do if I missed anything with that.
Yeah, I don't think it requires a scope if it's a direct purchase, because there's no work to be performed. So for example, if we're going to buy a Richard Thompson painting, it's a purchase. It's not like Mr. Thompson is going to create a work of art that depicts a certain thing, There's no personal service involved. It would, you know what I'm saying?
That would make sense. Yeah, just looking at my notes and remembering the discussion, I think there was at least assumed that there would be some kind of scope that would be tied to that contract. So maybe that's the case. Maybe it was determined not needed, but that was left off as a to-do.
Okay.
In my notes. So
Okay.
I'll reach out to urban development as well.
Okay.
Sure.
Okay, let's talk about the city of Hillsborough public mural work.
Yeah, so we met with, and we being myself, Chris joined. We had a couple of planners from the city, and we had our legal representation with us to meet with Michelle McCall Wallace of the city of Hillsborough. She's their cultural arts program manager. And so we were just kind of trying to, introduce her quickly to our program, get a little sense of what their public art program is as a whole and what their public mural specifically program looks like and some of the challenges maybe they've had or things that they've learned over the years. Their program is very similar to kind of how ours is now and how we're kind of looking to make small adjustments to our program. They allow murals, public murals on loan for, I think it was a 5-year period, to their collection. And it's kind of under the same easement process. There's a lot of upfront kind of education and work with the artist that she had explained that their public art supervisor, I think this was the position who may have passed on earlier this year, is vacant now. And so that person typically spends a fair amount of time working with the artists who are interested in doing murals. But they don't have a whole lot of murals at this point. They haven't had a lot of issues come up in regards to some of the concerns that we have regarding, First Amendment rights, free speech and how to regulate or not based on content. So she did share that they have some of the very same questions and concerns with, if somebody wants to come in and paint something that may be deemed offensive to a number of folks in our community, how do you kind of navigate that process? And something interesting to Hillsborough, they do not have apparently organized neighborhood associations. So they kind of lack that additional component, which we do kind of now have as part of the process for us. So that's a concern of hers, and she didn't have any answers moving forward. Basically, they're kind of in the same boat. They allow public murals temporarily into their collection. which if you look at our existing language, you know, they do come into our collection as well, but it's under that easement, and it's right now in the language for a minimum of 7 years. After that 7-year period, it can either remain or not in our collection based on the easement language. So I think it was really productive just to sit and listen to her discussion and just to kind of hear that they're having a lot of the same concerns. You know, if they start to have issues, what does the enforcement mechanism look like? You know, if they have people that are throwing up murals, or businesses that are kind of doing large representations of their business, you know, to draw attention to their company, what does the enforcement of that look like? And they don't really have an answer for that. That's one of the concerns that our sign code planning staff have had. If there's more interest generated and these things just kind of start, we've already seen a couple that have just kind of gone up. You know, who's going to address that and how? A lot of questions yet to remain. And so I think, again, it was good to listen to that. I have been meaning to reach out to others, Beaverton and Eugene, and I just haven't had a chance yet. But quite honestly, hearing back from our attorney after that meeting, he is willing to move forward with the proposed changes that we have still, which would clarify that pieces, murals do not need to be part of our collection, that they are part of the city under easement. But he would honestly just as soon leave what we have as it is, which is that they do come into the collection, but we could clarify that it's only for that 7 years or shorter. Just because it seemed to have worked thus far, and it doesn't really trigger any new workload for staff or concerns. So that's just the advice given to me. We can still move forward. At some point, I think we need to reach out and speak to more entities than we have yet. Folks are not interested in pushing this quickly. So I guess that's kind of where we're stand. I think there's a number of concerns still. And I think we need to chat with some other cities before we move forward. Alternately, if we do want to move forward, because I know that funding piece, you know, to free up the funds that we do have for potential maintenance, there's no concern in moving that through council. So if we wanted to do that sooner rather than later, we could. I guess that's kind of a question back to the group.
Comments from folks?
So just to clarify, the attorney was saying that he would prefer that we kept the status quo basically as it is now, that if someone wants to put a mural on their private structure, that it has to become part of the art collection. Is that what he's saying?
Correct. That's correct. It does become part of the art collection. You know, as the current easement language is written, they can be repainted after the end of the easement period, which in code is a minimum of 7 years. So had we moved forward, and I think it was stated at a number of the meetings, had we moved forward with like the Preserve Oregon mural, that would be part of the public collection. The time period would be a minimum of 7 years, but as the easement language currently stands, it could be repainted at the end of that.
Yeah.
So he would just assume that we keep that, and perhaps a minor tweak would be to shorten that or to clarify that each individual easement has its own time period, remove the minimum of 7 years, but it is part of the public collection. And I think there's questions on, you know, I think you can see both sides of the question around, do we want these pieces? Do we want everything in the public collection? I think the biggest concern is longevity and continued maintenance of these pieces, and that over time, these pieces, whether or not they were city commissioned, they're seen as the city's collection. And so there's, you know, if something is not well taken care of, or we desire it to be repainted at the end of 7 years, maybe that becomes a community concern at that point. So maybe you guys can help, I mean, better clarify what exactly the concern is beyond that. If I'm missing the point of the current concern of it being in the collection per se, if it's beyond, I mean, under the current language, they are, if it's on private property, they're still responsible for the maintenance for that time period. So we would not be maintaining the piece unless after 7 years, we took that upon ourselves and made it ours. So maybe you guys can help better clarify what the desire is to not have it part of the collection if it's beyond maintenance.
of it, Heather, to a certain extent is there are pieces of art that are quality and pieces of art that are a little less than the quality that we would like to have for the public art collection. I mean, you would make choices about a purchase using different criteria if you're buying it for the public art collection than, say, if I was going to go out and buy a piece of art from my home. And while it may be just fine even with the local community surrounding a business that they like a particular artwork, it may not rise to that standard. And we have pretty general guidelines about that. And I think that they were probably left that way deliberately so that we would have a little wiggle room through all that. They aren't really specific, but they do have a sense that the people who are on the commission have enough depth of knowledge about artwork that they would choose a particular type of artwork over another type of artwork. And so that's a very different concern than the legal concerns that the lawyer is raising.
And that makes sense. And I think I've tried to convey that as well to our attorney. I guess I would just counter, as I kind of continue to think about this a bit more as well, is, you know, this is public, it's public art, it's for the community. I'm not sure that a large percentage of the community would know, you know, what, or appreciates, you know, the differing levels of art. And I guess so you just kind of come back to what really is the purpose of the public collection. Is it to have kind of these higher value pieces, or is it to kind of celebrate the interests
Well, actually,
of the community?
that was the original question I was raising. I really did want to see in Salem allowing various levels of art without having for them to have to jump through the hoop of being part of the collection. I mean, when we choose to take a piece into the collection, or whether we choose not to, we're supposed to, as commissioners, follow a certain path. And there will be a lot of artwork that the community would really love. And to me, as an artist, the creative expression comes in a lot of different ways, but that doesn't necessarily mean that it has a place in the collection. And that's exactly the whole issue that first brought us to this point, was that that hurdle of being accepted into the collection actually would cause the rejection of some artwork that perhaps the community would like. And it would be nice to be able to accommodate both desires.
Agree.
Yeah, and frankly, whether we like it or not, the collection has a monetary value.
Mm-hmm.
And we're, as fiduciary obligations, we need to, as commissioners, keep that in mind as well.
I was going to ask, when you said that you could adjust the easement, the length of the easement to shorter terms than the seven standard, for what reason would you benefit other than the responsibility to maintain it? It could be painted over, but I'm just trying to think as we go here. So if we could have shorter terms on certain things for the purpose of not having the city have to maintain it, because isn't that some of the issue? I mean, I'm thinking like, you know, one of the better pieces, say someone tagged graffiti on it, and then that now needs to be repaired. I mean, there's certain things like there's just all this liability with the city to have all these murals fall under one thing. I'm wondering what happens when the easement periods are shorter. So, you know, they could be dependent on the length of the lease of the business that you, why would it go 7 years? I mean, so then say you could set it for 2, it's based on other reasons other than just standard 7-year easement.
Yeah.
Would then allow it to get off of the city's shelf for having to maintain.
So right now, we're not really responsible for, I can't speak to like the Mattingly and some of the older pieces. I don't know how those were accepted into the collection, but anything, I think the piece that's on the what is the Assistance League, anything that the murals downtown are on city property, so those are different. But from what so 7-year, that 7-year time frame is in code as a minimum time frame for murals. All of the more recent murals that have been accepted into the collection have been accepted through that easement process, which require, if they're on private property, that the private property owner maintain them for that 7-year period. Okay. And they all have the caveat that after that period, they can be repainted, or if there's a major substantial change to the business, it changes ownership, or there's a major remodel, that it can be repainted for that as well. So they're part of the public collection, but it's clarified in the easement language. Again, by code, they're required to remain for 7 years, but it's clarified in the easement language that the city's not maintaining them for that period of time. Again, the Mattingly and these others that were kind of adopted into the collection, we don't have those easements, or we don't seem to have the background documentation that clarifies that. And that's kind of what has led to the problem. Plus, I think the Mattingly and some of those others are kind of, in a sense now, you know, they're community pieces, and I don't think there'd be any desire to repaint those at this time, because they've grown in community value and recognition. They've become iconic over time. And so that I see that as a concern with allowing pieces into the collection and then potentially repainting. But otherwise, the maintenance does not fall on the city per the current easement language that we have.
So essentially the maintenance is not really an issue. It all really comes down to this. Are we, you know, if they have to be part of the collection, then we're going to be stifling people putting murals up in the community, because a lot of the murals are not going to be painted by important artists in Salem, and they're not going to, you know, reach to the level of being included in the collection. So I really feel that we need to figure out that other avenue that can allow other levels of art to be created.
So I guess that's where we're at. So if we still feel strongly that they should not be part of the public collection, we do need to push forward and clarify that language in our code, which again, you know, our legal is a bit concerned with. Just beyond me, but we're making a minor change, and we're accepting pieces that aren't part of the collection. There's not really an enforcement mechanism if we have a larger group of people that we would accept in as murals. The way it currently is they are allowed into the collection, but it's basically what Hillsborough is doing. Is it's on loan. They're not seen to be part of the collection in perpetuity. After that 7-year period, they can go away. So it basically is a loan to the collection. So I guess it comes back to, you know, if maintenance is not the concern, kind of what is the definition and what do we want to accept into the public collection, albeit even temporarily.
So I have I'm just wondering out loud here, is there an avenue or opportunity to create something separate that's not the public art collection, but perhaps a mural collection that does not then, it's not the standards that we apply to the public art collection are different for mural, and then provides that avenue.
So that's what we've been pushing, right? If we move forward with the revisions that our attorney has given us, that other avenue would be acquisition to the city via an easement, but not considered part of the public collection. It's really just a play on words. I
right.
mean,
so I'm not understanding what the attorney's reticence is for this. for that.
A lot of
avenue.
the concern is coming out of, I think, Portland, and the fact that, our First Amendment apparently or the rulings in Oregon are even, as he sees it, more stringent than the federal. So there's been a lot of litigation up in the Portland arena. Anytime you try to regulate artwork based on content, that interjects free speech, and you can be there. I mean, it can just lead to litigation for that. In the state, and we haven't ran into that yet, but as we start to accept more pieces, I think it's possible that how these pieces come into the collection. If we take ownership as a city, we have more leeway in what we would accept because we're acquiring the piece. If we do not take ownership, then we need to accept everything. And so Portland has just a permit. They don't have an easement. It's just a permit where things come in. There's some public input to the process, but things are just allowed if they go through the process. For us, we would still like to be able to make some decisions on what we accept into the city. We have more power to do that without legal concerns if we are acquiring pieces. And that can be acquired into the collection, or we can acquire through the city, through that easement, if we just clear that out, separate that out in the language of code.
I think that we're probably going to continue to have a little bit more conversation on this.
Right.
We're running kind of low on time today. For me, the question is, if what we really want to foster is creative vitality across the city, all ages, all expressions, multiple areas of the city, then how do we do that in a way that facilitates that type of growth without getting overly entangled with city bureaucracy, just to cut through it?
Yeah.
I mean, some of the Forest for the Trees projects are on buildings that are slated for demolition. And so the building's going to go away completely. The Sunshine Dairy would be one example. And if we could identify some of those locations in Salem and let people know about them, then maybe we could see some of this activity without having a permit. I don't know. I felt the conversation with the City of Hillsborough people was very productive. And their Michelle McCall Wallace was very, very good. So, I mean, I suggest we have another conversation with the City of Eugene, which has been, they were encouraging murals in the downtown area because of the Olympic trials, which didn't happen. But so they must have found a way around this. And then I do think maybe having a conversation with the Forest for the Trees folks in Portland, to just figure out how they get through it would be worth it. But it seems like we're going through a lot of conversation when we don't have money for anything, and we don't have any sites. We don't have any property owners that are saying, I've got my massive cold storage facility either in West Salem or off Front Avenue and north of downtown that I could give to a group of artists, as a site. So
I think we do have people who are interested in putting murals up, not necessarily looking for funding for that, but they need a pathway to be able to do it if they're interested. And my concern is that right now the process is very cumbersome, and it creates a lot of hoops for people to jump through. And I think that dissuades people from engaging in the process and putting forward their ideas. So I would argue that we should prioritize this and try to come to a process for making it easier for people to get murals up if that's what they would like. And I think that involving the neighborhood associations could be beneficial, to use them as maybe the first point of application for a mural. And then once the neighborhood association because that group is more likely to understand, what their immediate community is interested in seeing in terms of murals. And then they could put forward, the recommendation that yes, they would like to have this mural in their neighborhood, and then a process from there. I think that that's something that we could explore as a process. And if we don't go down this road of having a city-owned mural collection, let's call it, is there a way within the public art collection that we could have sort of a sub collection that's just murals that has a different standard than what we would apply to, sculpture, painting, portable work, percent for art. There are a lot of different categories within the public art collection. Can we not make mural one of those and do it that way?
Well, obviously, we'll keep talking about this. We're now at 11:30. I'm going to have to sign off in a few minutes.
Okay,
Speaking of neighborhood associations, could I just see a show of hands? How many of you go to your neighborhood association meetings?
Occasionally.
I think they're all over the map. My neighborhood association meets tonight, the SCAN neighborhood, and on the agenda is a presentation from the people who are organizing the exterior ceramic tile mural at South Salem High School. I'm going to call into the meeting and I can report back on that, but they have not requested a mural permit as far as I know.
I reached back out to see if I could get an update if they determine whether it would be placed inside or out, and I haven't received a response. Again, I did share with her the current process for that, so.
Okay.
Let's just talk about this one little snippet. There seems to be complete agreement that we need to revamp the how the money is allocated.
There's
And
been no concerns expressed on that.
so maybe for the sake of getting that off of our to-do list, maybe we should go ahead and have a vote on that and just see if we can move that little snippet forward.
Before we do that, there is something that I wanted to bring up today that relates to the code and a question and then a possible proposal or recommendation. I'd like to put forward the idea that we explore expanding the Art Commission to include another at-large position, so that we can get others to participate who may not have the required background that is applied to 6 of the 7 current positions. And the reason, my reasoning for this is that I feel like we do need some more diversity on the panel. I think demographically, age, race, socioeconomic, so on and so forth. And the categories that we have right now, there may be some people in the community, for whatever reason, their age or other factors, have not had the opportunity to pursue the training that we're basically requiring as the other 6 members of the commission. So I think an at-large, another at-large position would widen the pool of potential applicants. And the idea of it, I believe anyways, is to engage the community at large. So I don't know what the process is. I've looked at the other commissions and I know that there is a precedent for having larger groups. Several of the other commissions have up to 15 members and there are a couple that have 9. So I'm throwing that out there as something to think about, and I don't know what the process is.
The only thing I can add is I know they do not like even numbers. So if we add it, we have 7 members now. I think we would need to request 2 additional members.
Okay.
I agree with Rachel.
Yeah, I have no objection to that. Did we not have a subcommittee to deal with code issues?
No, I don't think we really did. We talked about it.
Okay. It seems like that would be, even if a small number of people could agree to work with Heather, I'm happy to do it. To just kind of try to bundle this.
Yeah.
And then have a timeline. I mean, I granted we've done a lot during a pandemic, and but I think having a couple more conversations regarding the mural front, and then cleaning up what I would just describe as the housekeeping stuff in the code. Whether we need to add anybody, whether we need the list of definitions is appropriate, whether there's duplicative language, whatever any of that is, and just deal with it.
And I will bring our attorney back to the discussion. I apologize if I've kind of fumbled through his concerns a little bit, but he's quite firm in his concerns, and so I guess it'd be best to have them come from him. So
Yeah, I'm fine with that. What else? And I'll report after I go to the SCAN meeting tonight. Okay, I guess the question is, what if I'm and of course, when they see my name on the Zoom screen, they know exactly why I'm there, my neighborhood. And then they'll ask me pointed questions like, well, why do they have to get a mural permit? And I, of course, refer to them to you, Heather, at the city. But often Vanessa Nordyke and Tom Anderson are usually there. So I just want to make sure I'm saying the right stuff.
yeah, I mean, per code, we need to notice for 30 days provide notice to the neighborhood association if it's going to be exterior, and then get approval from the art commission to be accepted into the collection as it currently is.
Okay, I'll report back.
And she has the application. I did forward that early on when she was questioning, so.
Okay.
Good luck.
And so the easement for that would be through who? The Salem Kaiser, who owns the actual high school building?
I think it would be Salem Kaiser School District, and we would ask in the easement that they maintain it for 7 years in order for us to accept it.
Yeah. I mean, there's a big construction project at South that's started. So I'll be curious. I mean, they've talked about the exterior wall that's on Rural that faces east by the gym end of the building. There's a parking lot and there's a reader board. It's that wall, I believe. But
Home of the Saxons.
Right by the Go Saxons, yeah.
Home of the Saxons, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. I'm the parent of 2 Saxons, so I'm.
Can I just add one thing to add to piggyback the last SPAC meeting, and not to be that guy, but the preserve mural is still not painted out. And to me, the reason why I keep citing is because, we spend a lot of time talking about things, when you think about all the time we spent to address that issue. And to me, it's falling in this, it's been plenty of dry weather. It would take a couple of hours to paint that. I'm not quite sure why it's stalled, but I'm just bringing it back in just because in fairness, it's like if it's cited, it was clearly declared it needed to go away, and it's not, and it's been months and months and months. So
right.
I don't know. I mean, I would say that if it was, I'm not picking on the art or whatever. I just think, in due diligence to look, we spend, there's a lot of us involved, and we spend a lot of time, and then we just kind of set precedents, a decision's made. And then I'm not saying that there's been anyone's dropped the ball. It's just, I just want to stand for something that when we all feel good about the decisions it's made, that it's enforced and done in a nice way.
Right.
I feel like we've allowed plenty of dry time considering, and also the lockdown and everything. It's like, in fairness, like, all right, there's a lot of bigger priorities than that. But you know, if I were a business person across the street from something and didn't like it, and then it stayed up after a ruling was made, I'd be upset about it. So.
Yeah.
But can't your compliance people at the city kind of in the same way that, you know, when somebody parks in the no parking zone at the bottom of Lincoln Street and, you know, to make a turn, you practically get into a head-on collision. I call the city compliance people and they'll come out and they'll ticket. And, you know, it's like you've got a unit within local government that can handle some of that stuff.
Yeah, we do. This one was a little messy. You know, it went from planning back to us, and it sat for a while. And so I can, you know, I can reach back out to the business owner. She had told me she was going to repaint it, so I can do that again. And then I guess if that's not working, then we need to take that approach and who's going to go out and is planning going to start, or we just go straight to code enforcement. I guess we'll kind of navigate through that. But that's some of the questions I think that group has had, is what is the process for that look like, and who's going to go out and do that. So
yeah, I mean, I think that particular project, unfortunately, is the example for why we need to get this wrapped up and get a process in place that's easy for people to navigate. I think there are a lot of people who actually like that, and they are confused about why the city has said it needs to come down. I've seen people commenting on social media that it's just another example of the city wanting to, you know, stifle creative expression and define art for the community. And so I would say I don't want to be seen as being that person, because I definitely want creative expression in Salem. And the longer we sort of drag out the process of revising the code, the more we are putting out the you know, the idea that we don't want these things. And I, for one, I definitely do want to see more of this in the community. And I think, you know, we need to prioritize creating a process for people that feels equitable and accessible. And right now it's just so murky and cloudy and doesn't make much sense to us. It doesn't make sense to the community. And I think we just need to get it going. So anyhow, I just want to be on record of saying that, because I do think that this also underscores a reason to involve the neighborhood associations as part of the mural process, whatever that looks like.
Where are you seeing social media comments about that particular mural?
Instagram.
Oh, I don't hear anything. I mean, seriously, nothing.
So, I mean, just people you know, using it as a backdrop and taking pictures, and people saying, "Oh, that's great, I like it," and then other people saying, "Oh, well, you know, it's been nixed by the art commission," and so on and so forth, and which is true, but it's also out of context, and we have not done anything to move the process forward really since that. So I just think we need to prioritize it and make it accessible so that we can have more murals in town.
Yeah, and I'll just add, you know, Hillsborough, like I said, their process is not that much different than ours, but they do have it laid out clearly on their website. They have a flow chart process, a how-to, everything's laid out, and we could take that approach with whatever decision we make to whatever we have to help clarify it for people easily. So I can schedule, if there's folks that want to, you know, partake in a subcommittee to kind of knock this out. I can schedule something in a couple weeks if you just let me know who's interested. I would bring in our attorney and get some feedback. I don't know if we would have Beaverton or Eugene participate, but get some other feedback at that time. And I would just ask this group, once again, I think really the question is our public collection and how we want to define that, and whether or not we have different levels of what's accepted into the public collection, or if we remain adamant. And I kind of see both sides in a collection that's completely separate from the public collection. I think that's really what the question keeps coming back to. And then from whatever we decide on that, we just clarify it and move forward.
Eileen?
Heather, the talking to Eugene, I think, will be very beneficial. It's been months since I looked at their site, but they really do have seem to have a multi-level approach to murals. And so, of course, I don't really have that time right now to go look again and talk to them. But if you could do that, that would be great.
I'll do that first. Yeah. So who's interested in joining in?
I am, as long as it's a month down the road.
I'm interested in joining, and I want to go on record and say that I agree completely with what Rachel was saying about this.
Yes.
Okay. Do we want to try to meet this month? And it sounds like that's not an option for you, Eileen. Wait till August. Is that okay with the
Well,
group?
you go ahead and meet, and perhaps in the next time around I can get back on. But I just don't have the time right now.
Sure. Okay.
Yeah,
I'm
I mean,
happy to be involved.
I don't know
as
who's
well,
running the
but-
public art program for the city of Eugene right now. But, you know, it seems like a phone call like we did with Hillsborough would cover a lot of ground.
I'll do that. And I still have Betty LeDuc is on my radar. I still need to draft a letter. I did not get that done, but I know that's on my to-do list. And just so the group knows, we did get $10,000 allocated, not 15 that we requested from top funds, but we did get 10,000. And so the balance is just under 63,000 right now. And there was one other thing I was going to share, and I've lost it. So let me know if you have questions. I'll look to schedule something soon, try to do that with Eugene and our attorney, and just send that to everybody. And if you can attend and are interested, let me know. We'll see if we can get moving forward.
Sounds great. Okay, thank you, everybody. We are adjourned. It's 11:46.
Okay.
Okay, have a good one.
Thanks.
Thank
Bye.
You too.
Yeah.
Bye.
Tell everybody to, on July 18th and 19th, to go to salemartassociation.org if you, and we are putting on a virtual art fair. And that's what I've been doing for the last 2 months.
Exciting. Yeah.
It's going to happen.
Okay, bye, everybody.
Thank you.
And
Bye.
thank you.
Bye-bye.